At its peak, a single rain-swept island off the coast of Europe dictated the fate of the globe. By 1921, the British Empire reached its quantitative peak, covering a full quarter of the Earth's landmass and governing one-third of the human population. Today, that footprint has receded, leaving the British government with direct authority over just 14 small overseas territories. Outposts like Gibraltar serve as the final strategic markers of a network that once spanned every time zone. Sustaining this scale from a minor medieval kingdom required a system of delegated institutional design that moved the cost of expansion off the state balance sheet. During the 1500s, England was a small state that lacked the massive liquid capital required to fund permanent overseas settlements. Early exploration was defined by extreme volatility. Attempts at settlement frequently resulted in the total disappearance of colonists or complete financial ruin. To bypass this capital constraint, the English state decided to outsource the risk of territorial expansion to private entities. Private adventurers and corporations assumed the primary financial burden of mapping, claiming, and defending new lands in the name of the crown. This framework utilized financial engineering to shift the immense liabilities of early colonization onto private corporate balance sheets. The central engine of this expansion was the joint stock company. These entities pooled capital from hundreds of investors, ensuring against individual ruin. If a ship was lost, the damage was distributed. In exchange, the Crown granted these companies an exclusive monopoly over trade within specific regions. The East India Company and the Royal African Company became the primary vehicles for this state-sanctioned mercantile growth. The high capital requirements of the joint stock model demanded consistent, high-volume returns. To achieve this, the Royal African Company leveraged its monopoly to industrialize the transatlantic slave trade, treating human beings as high-yield commodities to satisfy shareholder expectations. Growing political pressure from abolitionist groups eventually forced the state to dismantle the slave trade within the empire by 1807. Through this model, the state acquired a global network for free, trading monopoly rights for taxable trade wealth and expanded geopolitical influence. As corporations claimed distant lands, the Crown had to decide how these territories would be governed day to day. The empire used three administrative models. Crown colonies operated under direct monarch rule, burdening the state. Charter colonies used corporate agreements, granting settlers decentralized political liberty. Proprietary colonies were commercial ventures ruled by absentee governors, functioning solely to generate wealth for distant owners. This created a persistent tension. The British state sought long-term geopolitical stability, but the companies administering the land required immediate extractable profits. The resulting friction between commercial ambition and state control created a volatile administrative environment that eventually threatened the unity of the empire. Managing complex societies through private mandates across an ocean proved fundamentally unstable. The failure of the Roanoke colony and the ruinous Darien scheme illustrate the extreme perils of these early expeditions. Even successful colonies matured into societies that resented being taxed by distant parliaments or corporate boards, where they held no political voice. This lack of administrative legitimacy led directly to the Revolution and subsequent loss of the 13 American colonies. The loss of America forced a shift in state strategy, leading to the direct establishment of penal settlements in Australia to house British convicts. Commercially driven governance provided a powerful engine for initial expansion, but it lacked the political foundations needed to maintain control over mature territories. The ultimate failure of corporate administration occurred in Asia with the East India Company. The company evolved into a sovereign proxy state, maintaining its own private armies to control vast territories like Bengal and extract regional resources. This model reached a violent breaking point during the 1857 Sepoy Rebellion. The company was forced to fight its own mutinying proxy troops to maintain order, exposing the weakness of a privatized military structure. In 1858, the British government responded by dissolving the East India Company, citing its inability to provide effective administration. India was absorbed into direct state control as a crown colony, becoming the most valuable asset in the imperial portfolio. A pattern emerged. Whenever a private proxy became too volatile or too essential to the national economy, the state systematically absorbed it into direct crown rule. By By the 19th century, direct state rule had largely replaced the era of corporate charters. The state intervened directly to protect global trade routes, most notably through the military occupation of Egypt to secure the Suez Canal. This centralized expansion met intense resistance, particularly from Boers vettlers in Africa, who fought against the imposition of British state authority. To defend this massive global network, Britain relied on millions of proxy troops from its colonies and dominions to fight in 2 world wars. While the empire reached its maximum size in 1921, the immense financial cost of global conflict bankrupted the British state, destroying the capital foundation the entire system relied upon. Post-1945, an overstretched and bankrupted Britain could no longer afford the administrative and military price of maintaining crown rule across the globe. This led to a rapid wave of decolonization, as the state systematically withdrew its presence from territory after territory. The formal handover of Hong Kong in 1997 served as the final symbolic closure of this colonial era. Many former colonies transitioned into the Commonwealth, retaining trade and cultural links without the burden of direct state administration. The rise of the British Empire was a success of delegated institutional design and private capital, but its fall was the inevitable result of a state losing the capacity to underwrite the costs of its own expansion.